Welcome to the Voices of Young People podcast, brought to you by Springtide Research Institute. In each episode, we hear directly from young people as they respond to our research and share about the issues impacting their lives. As sociologists and researchers, we see a new story unfolding for young people, one that moves beyond traditional institutional boundaries and requires careful attention to the inner and outer lives of emerging generations. At the intersection of being and becoming, it's the Voices of Young People.
I guess I don't know. I'm kind of worried I'll get in somewhere and then they're going to keep doing online school, so I'll start online at a new school. Yeah. But I guess I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Voices of Young People podcast. We're back today with Jana, our fabulous intern, one of our fabulous interns. I put a plug at the end of her first show that she was on talking about this research for people who are interested in being one of Jana's colleagues and doing an internship with us. We have a call out right now for summer and fall interns. We all work remotely anyway, so it's going to be okay. We don't have an office to come into or disinfect because who knows when we're going to be allowed to do that. So Jana, you're back with us today. And last time we were talking about trust in... No. We were talking about isolation and loneliness among young people, and you had some really great things for us there. Before we get going too far into this, today I want to talk about young people and their relationships and trust in institutions. Before we get into that, though, would you mind just reminding people sort of who you are, what you do for us, and why you're on today?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Jana, and I'm an intern with Springtide. I'm a psychology major, and I'm a second-year college student who will be transferring in the fall.
Fantastic. And we still don't know where you're transferring to yet.
Who knows?
Who knows? But we're excited about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, John, again, thank you for being here back with us a second time. And I think, as I mentioned before, it's really important not just to, we have the data here from this research that we've been doing, and it's all encapsulated. I think, the designers did a great job. It's very accessible. It's pretty, if that counts for anything. I think it does, right? The report is Belonging, Reconnecting America's Loneliest Generation. But even though there's a combination of quantitative and qualitative evidence in there that does help bring some of these concepts to life, I think it's really important for us and to hear directly from people in that 13 to 25-year-old age range about how they're experiencing these things. And that's how this podcast comes in, and that's what I thought was so valuable about our first conversation too, was sort of just giving, one person's perspective about how this comes to life. And one of the key findings that came out of that report is backing up some other evidence about trust in institutions. And so Gallup and others have been finding that since the 1970s, trust in social institutions has been declining dramatically. So just to give a couple of key numbers here, the trust in the medical system went from 80% to 36%. Trust in the presidency went from 52% to 38%. Newspapers from 39 to 23. In our report, in Belonging, we asked specifically just 13 to 25-year-olds to sort of rank order how much trust they had in large social institutions. And so we asked them to do this on a scale of 1 to 10, and we gave them nonprofits, public schools, banks, religion, media, presidency and Congress, and big businesses. 1 being no trust at all, 10 is complete trust. Not a single one of those institutions ranked higher than a 5.3. Nonprofits were at 5.3, which is just above the midpoint. And then an organized religion at 4.8, right around the middle of this group, and big business down to 3.8 on the trust scale out of 10 points. So basically the takeaway here is nobody's trusting these large institutions, which I think is such a weird, it's a weird moment in American history where, I think about my grandparents whose entire lives were organized by these large social institutions, whether it was the military or the United States government or big corporations, whatever, doing great things. I don't think my grandfather would understand these numbers, but I totally recognize that my students definitely feel this. And I'm wondering how you respond to that notion that 13 to 25-year-olds have, not all Americans have declining trust for institutions, but 13 to 25-year-olds especially seem to have no confidence in them at all.
And this is purely speculative, but I wonder how much of it has to do with the information overload we get as young people. I mean, for like, I can think about, not trusting banks. It's, I grew up when there was the recession in
Mm-hmm.
2009, and, not trusting the government, and politics has become, so much more divided. And you grow up hearing these things, and then you grow up seeing it on the news every single
Mm.
night. And then slowly over time, unconsciously, that affects how you think about these institutions.
Yeah. Tell me more about that. So you led off with the banks thing, and you grew up during that. So tell me how you think that either how you know or how you suspect that has affected your own sort of trust levels or thinking about the banks and other institutions.
I kind of grew up thinking that, the government's there to help me, things can't go wrong. Life is pretty okay. And if something does go wrong, the government will, help me out, help my family out. They wouldn't just, let people suffer for no good reason. And then the recession happened.
Hmm.
And and that was the moment where I took the rose-colored glasses off and seeing these big institutions, because I was like, well, I'm maybe they don't hold my best interests at heart. Um, and that was kind of the first moment it happened. And then that happened again also with like the war in Afghanistan. I was like, maybe the military isn't just about killing the bad guys, quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote. Maybe it's a lot more complex than that. And maybe the way I'm being given information about it is sort of skewing it in a more positive, more simplistic light.
Yeah. Do you make a distinction there? Do you distinguish between the individuals in those things and the institutions themselves? Like, I mean, I think because I can imagine that it would be entirely possible to think like, oh, maybe this is more complex than quote unquote killing the bad guys, but the people in the military individually, you would still have a high degree of respect for. And like, I know people who work in banks and in finance, and I like them individually, but the system maybe itself isn't in my best interest. Are you making those distinctions, or are they all like piled together for you?
Yeah, I am. And it's so abstract, but it's, I respect veterans and people who have served, but do I respect, you know, war? Do I respect that? Not necessarily, but I do respect the individuals, because I mean, we're all human, and I'll get it, and things are more
Mm-hmm.
complex than they seem on the front. So,
Because I think that's important when we get to those, especially to understanding some of the nuances of those other institutions that are maybe more right in Springtide's lane about, nonprofit organizations and organized religion and things like that. So when you think about both from an individual's working in them perspective and from the
mhm.
institutional level, we see lots of young people, like yourself, I would imagine, maybe even some of your friends, like fleeing from organized religion. But maybe are you saying that they maybe don't feel that way about the individuals working inside of those institutions?
I have heard from so many of my friends that they have stopped going to church as frequently as they used to. And they always mention that, it's not that I want to do it and I'm going to miss the people there. That's
Hmm.
always it, right? I'm going to miss the connections I have there. Or, like, my main friend group goes to that church or that religious institution. But I just feel like, as a whole, it doesn't necessarily align with my values. And so I think, sometimes people end up making that sacrifice where they say, I like the people, but I have to let it go because I just can't belong to something where I don't agree with what it stands
Sure,
for.
even if they like the people who are in it or respect them or
Right.
hold them in value. And that was one of the things that came out of belonging too. I mean, not that specific thing, but that one of the things that was just sort of stunning to me was that um, there was there is some degree of participation, but that the young people in our study kept making this clear distinction between attending and actually feeling a sense of belonging. That attending
Mm-hmm.
those worship services on Friday evenings, Sunday mornings, going to youth group or campus ministry groups or whatever, that didn't really seem to have any direct correlation to a feeling of belonging at that institution at all. Like those two things were separate.
Right.
Instead,
Right.
it was all about like what created the sense of belonging. We outlined this in more detail, but it was all about relationships, and specifically relationships with trusted adults, not with each other, which I think again is counterintuitive because we often think about the relationships with peers being so important, but what we kept finding was that relationships with adults mattered. Can you sort of speak to that a little bit and tell me, maybe give me some ways that adults have mattered in your life in those institutions?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, peers are great when you need someone to talk to, but sometimes you need guidance, and sometimes it's guidance that other young people don't have because they haven't lived a long life. So, I mean, one person I can really think of that has given me so much guidance is my mentor, who is a professor at my
Hmm.
college. Um, and the great thing is that he doesn't just guide me academically, but also personally, and that's an important relationship to have, I
Yeah.
think.
And when you say guidance, like, what does that guidance look like? Is he like sending you emails telling you what to do or something every day?
No, it usually is me sitting in his office and just, venting about everything I'm worried about and or scared about or unsure about. And he'll give me his perspective, and then he'll say, well, why don't you try this, maybe this would help, and then I begrudgingly go, okay, I'll try that, and then it helps, which is good. Um, or if I'm unsure about what I want to do for a career or where I want to continue with my education, he has always been there to listen to me and then give me his advice.
Yeah. So it sounds like a high dose of listening.
Yes, 100%, 100%. And I'm so grateful for it because I'm sure it can get annoying after a while. So I'm glad he sits and listens to me for so long.
Well, and that's a good point. Like, when I'm a professor myself, and certainly have a lot of students that from time to time we do these kinds of things. And what I've realized over the years is that it's not listening it's a skill in terms of its intent, not just in terms of your ability to do active listening, but to consistently get yourself into a posture and a position where you can sit down and genuinely listen to somebody. That is work. Especially
Mm-hmm.
when it is your job to do it. And it's not, when I say it's work, it doesn't mean that I don't want to hear my students. I do. It just means that it does require some intentional effort on my part to make sure that I'm fully present in that moment. And so what you're saying there is, it's not, I think it's important to understand that it's not just because your advisor is like some, unbelievably great human being. He may be, but there's also a
Right.
skill set behind that can be taught and replicated, and other people can do it. It's not like a natural thing. It reminds me of, when I will get students who will come to me and say, oh, well, I can't do statistics because I'm not good at math. I was like, well, math is just
Mm.
a skill. Like, we can teach you how to do that.
Right.
Like, it's not in
Right.
your genetic code to be good at math.
Right. Right.
That's a really great example, Jana. I don't know, maybe this isn't the case for you, but I'm wondering if there have been adults who have done that same kind of work for you along your faith journey too, at some point in your life.
Yeah, I would say that my parents have definitely been that person of guidance for me in my journey of spirituality. And they've kind of replicated the same thing that my professor did, where they would just listen. They would just listen to me.
Mm-hmm.
I would go up to my mom and bug her right before bed, because that's when all the good
Right.
ideas come, like right before bed when you have to
Yeah.
go to bed. And I would just be like, Mom, do you believe in God? And she would just be like, Jana, it's midnight, but she'll,
I don't believe in anything right
but
now.
she would listen. Yeah, right. She's like, you know what? I believe in my bed. But she would listen to me. And she would tell me what she thinks about these things. And then I would do the same thing with my dad. And they were always very open and honest with me. And they, were very humble. And they would say, well, I don't know.
Hmm.
Maybe not. But that's also for you to figure out if you decide to. And I really respect that, and I'm glad I had that growing up.
Yeah, it strikes me as being like such an not anti, but a non-institutionalized response. I mean, it's a conversation at midnight, 30 minutes before bed.
Right.
Like, what is...
It can't get more organic.
Yeah,
than
like,
that,
what's less, like, that
Like,
is, that you're identifying that, and like a conversation in a professor's office. You're identifying these things that are just like inherently non-programmatic.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
unless
I didn't even think
unless
about
you're
that.
like, I don't think you could even like build a, like, hey, we're gonna have a regular 11:30 p.m. check-in call, with everybody before bed.
Right. then it loses the magic. You can't schedule it. It's got to be off the
Right.
cuff.
And we kept hearing, that is right in line with what we heard in Belonging. And one of the cool things is that while I think that that inherently sort of undermines, especially for religious leaders, and faith leaders, like the last 20 years of programmatic efforts are sort of called into question by your examples and the data that we have in the research report. That doesn't mean that it can't be done intentionally, and it doesn't mean that it can't be done as a part of a collective effort. Like there are some ways that we outline there that can be done, but it just means that it can't be done sort of like, I think this would be the most disruptive thing if I was working in direct ministry. It can't be done on my schedule. Like it sort of has to be done
right
at the young person's schedule, and you have to create the conditions where they'll come and talk to you, which is clearly what your advisor and your parents had done. Because the groundwork for those conversations and for you even being willing and able to come and talk to them was laid far in advance of you actually just walking downstairs at 11:30 at night and saying, "Do you believe in God?" They had done all that trust building work ahead of time.
Right, and it's all about that. Right, they've had 21 years to do it, so they're kind of at the advantage. Yeah,
it's a much longer game. Well, Jana, thank you for this. I think it's really important to get this like sense of, in these real concrete examples of sort of how relationships look and why they're important, and just as important as how those relationships worked in your life was what you didn't say. I mean, when you were talking about what was really important in these places, like you weren't talking about programs. And it's, for me, it's not to say that programs are were always the wrong thing. I think that we live in such a different world of where young people don't trust your institutions. So it demands that we shift approaches in terms of, how we engage with them, because that was also, I think, one of the things that I'm hearing you say, and one of the things that came through in our research is that young people still very much need trusted adults in their lives to help them navigate some of these important questions and moments in their life.
It just has to be a little bit different. People just have to adapt.
Yeah, good point. Okay, well, thank you very much, and we'll be back next week with another episode talking with more young people on the Voices of Young People podcast about their reactions to some of the data from Belonging, Reconnecting America's Loneliest Generation, which is you can find at Amazon, iBooks, and you can order physical copies. If you're still a physical copy reader, you can see more of it at springtideresearch.org.
Visit springtideresearch.org to hear more voices of young people and to download our latest research report, Belonging, Reconnecting America's Loneliest Generation. Sign up for our newsletter and be the first to learn about our upcoming research and ways to take action in your own communities. Today's show was produced by TJ Birnbaum with original music by high school student Christian Unthank. Special thanks to our guests today and all the young people whose perspectives and insights make our research possible. Remember to find us on social media at We Are Springtide and share your own story with the hashtag ShowUpForYoungPeople. Thanks for listening.